And you are the host of Vet Chats, which you run on Instagram and you do it live, which is such a millennial thing to do, by the way. So hats off to you.
Very on brand.
Yes, you're on brand. And I love just like popping in, watching some of them live. You got this big smile on your face. You have all these people talking about amazing things. Like, I mean, you're killing it. You're doing so good. And I just had to have you on because I just love, well, there's really not many female podcasters for one. So I thought that was really unique about you. And for two, like to do it live on Instagram was just such a genius approach to it that I just had to have you on. So thank you so much for joining Team Hero Front tonight.
Well, thank you. I am honored to be on the #1 veteran podcast.
Oh, snap. Yep, it's right there.
Yes.
Next year it's going to be you, though. I don't know.
We'll see. Mine is very shabby.
It's not shabby. You're killing the game. Right? No, you're doing great. You're doing amazing. Okay, so Jenna, here's the topics that we're going to cover that were handpicked by you. And those topics are, first one is why we should focus on younger veterans. The second one is how the veteran community can be more inclusive. And the last topic, why tapping into the veteran community is so important. So you definitely intrigued me with those topics. But before we get to those topics, you have to go through the Hero's Gauntlet, and it's 3 questions that are usually random. But for you, I've seen you enough to where they're not random. They're tailored to you. So,
cool.
Yeah, so we're going to
I was nervous about this.
Were you?
Yes.
Don't be nervous. Okay, here we go. First one. Why did you start Vet Chats? Like, what was the moment where you knew I'm doing this?
All right. So that kind of takes it a little bit back to when I worked as an intern at the House Committee on Veterans Affairs, when I started working with veterans, working with the public, seeing what they needed. And I kind of realized that there was really no sense of community for the younger veterans. And then when I created my own through my Facebook group, I was like blown away by how incredible, like the incredible things that younger veterans were doing. And I was like, I need to showcase these stories. And I thought the perfect way to do that would be through interviews. And IG Live is so accessible, easy. You just press go live. And that's how it started.
Wow. So was there any specific person or moment in that journey that really stands out to you where you're like, wow, like I need to talk to people like this. No one knows about this person.
Yeah, I would say it honestly started very humble beginnings with just a few of my friends that I served with, and saw that they were going on to either create their own business, nonprofits, going to school, using VR and just really wanting to share those benefits.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's so much out there that we just don't know about. Like, we're just not tracking it at all. We get stuck in our bubble of our career field. And sometimes we never leave that bubble. Mm-hmm. And, I've been in 18 years. And since I started podcasting, my mind is continuously blown by what's out there because of who I meet. And I'm like, wait, you do what at the Pentagon? Like, what? How is what? I mean, just some incredible people doing big things out there. So I think that's an amazing start. And, it explains your why. So I love that. Okay. So second question here. You had a video that I watched it a few times because it didn't really look like you in this video, but it was you. And the video is titled "In the Navy, Drinking a Lot and in Toxic Relationships." Mm-hmm. I was hoping you could run us through the story behind that video.
Sure. So I was definitely, I joined right at 18, and, alcohol was a way that I really fit in. It was a way that I learned how to make friends, especially in the Navy, where it's kind of encouraged, to have drinking buddies, to go out and drink. That's how you relieve stress from the job. And I think when we're young, we can kind of take that a little too far, and you kind of latch onto other people who have that hobby, have that goal of drinking a lot. And yeah, I was definitely in that group. And it was not the best choices, but it was kind of just cultivated by that military culture that's centered around drinking.
Yeah. And then it has an after, which the after is like you have like a family now, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
a lot of people don't get that after. You know what I mean? Like I
Hmm.
had a problem drinking too. It started when I was in Guam and the drinking age was 18 then. And I started like leaning on that to get through things when, times got tough. And I call it a decade under the influence, which is a song title, but that's basically what my life was, a decade under the influence. And oh my goodness, I remember thinking like a life without drinking to me was impossible. Like it was only going downhill and there was
Hmm.
no possible way that I could turn that around. It felt completely impossible. So my question to you is, you did turn it around. You got this beautiful family. You even look younger now than you did when you were drinking. Isn't it funny how alcohol just makes you just look like
Yeah.
trash? You know what I mean? It
Hmm.
just makes you all puffy and like just nasty. I look
Yes.
terrible. I got to show you my pictures. I'll send you one. Um,
Hmm.
but how did you turn it around? Was there a certain moment? Was there a person? Was it, yeah, what was it? Fill us in on that.
So about probably like 3 weeks after I got out, I found out I was pregnant. Me and my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband. So yeah, that stops drinking dead in its tracks. And you got to figure out life sober very quickly. And yeah, that's really what turned me around for sure.
Okay. That makes sense. That was part of my turnaround as well. Like I don't drink at all anymore. Um, because I'm kind of an all or nothing person. But when I had kids, I
Mm.
remember I dropped, like I was drinking and I just had like my daughter. And I carried in like all these plates of food and because I was drunk, like I tripped and dropped them and they broke everywhere. And I remember thinking like, I can't carry my kid like this. Like, you know what I
No.
mean? So it was one of those eye-opening moments for me. So, your kids will make you a better person for sure. If you let it.
Yes, absolutely. They they really
Yes.
do.
So, okay, you're doing great so far with the Heroes Gauntlet. So, last
Yes.
question is, what was your proudest Navy moment? Was there a moment where you're wearing the uniform, you're a service member in the Navy, and you truly did feel proud of yourself in that moment?
I would say when I came back from deployment, I was on an aircraft carrier. So when you're coming back on the ship, your whole family's waiting for you. They have signs. You're dressed in your whites. It was summertime, so we were wearing our whites. And just like the look on my parents' face, like seeing me, it had been probably 8.5 months. And just like seeing how proud they were of me and knowing that I did that, uh, that was definitely my proudest moment. And also, I think I got qualified with like two airpins. So I was like, yeah, I was really proud of, I had accomplished things while I was gone. And I really kind of came back a different person.
Wow, that's beautiful. It sounds like you had like, I don't know, I was just picturing like the end of Top Gun when they're on the aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
But no, that's really beautiful. It sounds like you ended that deployment, the best way you possibly could have, which is in open arms from your parents. And in that moment, you kind of realize that, you weren't the same person anymore. You're actually better.
Hmm. Yeah, I ended a relationship while I was gone. So I was just like, yeah, I really worked on myself a lot during that time.
You were unstoppable.
Yeah, exactly. I felt like Sandy at the end of Grease, like I'm a new person, I'm ready to go.
And then that's when the car just flies for some reason, just flies out into the sunset. Um,
Yeah.
okay, so hey, Jenna, you did fantastic. You answered all the questions. Thank you for that. Thank you for the vulnerability. Um, and before we hit your topics, I was hoping you could just tell us a quick recap on just who you are and a little bit about like your military service and where you're at now.
Yeah, so I'm Jenna Carlton, originally from Wisconsin. I joined right out of high school. I did 4 years from 2013 to 2017 in the Navy. I was a weather girl. Aerographer's mate is the official title. And I was on board a few different ships, but I deployed on the aircraft carrier Harry S. Truman, CVN 75. And I was out of Norfolk, Virginia. So we did our deployment in the East Med, Arabian Gulf area. And yeah, I did 4 years. I got out. I went to pursue my bachelor's degree, and I'm in the DC area. And I decided to do an internship, which led me to the House Committee on Veterans Affairs. And I wanted to work there, but it didn't work out. I was kind of disheartened by the way politics. It sounds kind of crazy, but when you're in the mix and you really have a heart for veterans, and you see kind of how it's played as like almost a pawn in a game, I wanted to reach out to my community in the most authentic way I could. And that was through online, creating my own community for younger veterans who were getting out, which is the most vulnerable time, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. And that's what I'm doing now, just focusing on community building and interviewing my peers and showcasing their stories.
Wow. So would you say you're living your best life now?
Say that. Yeah, I could confidently say that. I'm trying.
Right.
Depends what day.
Yeah, no, I'm super proud of you. That's amazing. And with that other job that you had an internship for, it sounds like, you just cared too much. You know what I mean? A lot of those folks maybe never have served, so they have that emotional disconnect to sometimes make a decision that you might find cold or disheartened, and so you probably just cared too much is why it didn't work out, if I had to guess, which I think is a compliment to you. And I'm so happy that you've kind of paved your own path, and like the intent was there, your heart was in it, and you kind of just paved your own path to figure out how to exercise that.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm not blaming the political machine for how it is. I mean, there's reasons for it, but you're right. It was too personal for me. I took it a lot more serious than they would, and just coming in from that naive perspective. So yeah, I just decided to do it a more grassroots way.
Definitely. I love that. And by the way, next time I'm in that area, I'll hit you up. Maybe we can all meet, because my family lives in Virginia, and I grew up in Waldorf, Maryland.
No way. I am in Calvert County.
Oh, wow. So yeah, I grew up in Waldorf. I went to Westlake High School. I graduated in 2003. It was a much smaller community then. It was a lot of trees, a lot of woods. And now all that's gone. I see it occasionally, throughout the years, and yeah, it's grown immensely. It's changed a lot. My parents now live in a really nice part of Virginia, like real close to DC. I think it's called Fairfax Station.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, I think that's what it's called. So next time I'm there, hey, I'll hit you up.
Yes, definitely. Let me know.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're ready to hit these topics now. Okay, let's start with the very first one here. Why we should focus on younger veterans. What's your take on that?
So the VA released their suicide data not too long ago. I know there's some argument over how accurate it is, but it definitely pointed out to the second leading cause of death for younger veterans is suicide. The first one being accidents. So suicides being that second cause, it's very preventable, and it's something that we can we can fix. So I think just focusing on younger veterans, and they're most vulnerable during that first 12 months after service. That's when it's so important to intercept the veteran, welcome them to the community, and make sure they're taken care of. Kind of have that warm handoff between the DoD and the VA, which there's programs for it, but it's not as well known to every veteran. At least that's the kind of consensus I've come to with talking to recent veterans.
Definitely. So did that happen to you? Did you go through a hard time right out the gate when you separated?
Yeah, I've gone through it. My husband, I watched him go through that. Even having me, someone who's gone through it, I've just watched so many people go through almost like an identity crisis, especially if they joined when they were young. It's all they ever knew. And getting out after 4 years, doing 8 years, maybe two enlistments, it's like they forget who they are, and they still don't have that college education to fall back on. Sometimes they're out of state, they're displaced, they're not around family, they don't have that social capital around them. So it's just a really trying time for a lot of people.
Yeah, I kind of know how that feels actually, because when I did my 6 years, or my I was on a 6 year enlistment and I was at 5 years, and I was trying to retrain. I was in maintenance and it didn't work out. And this is when I was at like my lowest point, right? And
Hmm.
when it didn't work out like two times in a row, it looked like I was going to either have to stay in maintenance, which I was not a good fit for me, and I definitely wasn't going to do that. Um, or separate. So I thought, oh, I'll just separate. And yeah, it was pretty terrifying. I gotta be honest. It was super terrifying to me. And I looked at my bank account. I had like no money, tons of debt. I
Hmm.
was terrified to do school. I know that I'm done school since then, but at that time I just didn't have the confidence or the know-how for
Yeah.
college, right? So I had no school, no money, and a crippling drinking problem, and I was about to separate. Like, by the grace of God, I did get the retrain on the third time, and that changed my whole life. That was like the first good thing that happened to me in a while. But if I think about the Josh White that would have gotten out at
Hmm.
6 years, I don't even think I'd be alive if I'm being honest with you,
Wow.
because
Hmm.
I was hanging by a thread, like having panic attacks, insomnia, so
Yeah.
to and just the shame of feeling like a failure. I would have moved back in with my parents where I would have known nobody. And yeah, like there was no handoff if that would have happened to me. There was like a 2 weeks like of taps is what we call it.
Hmm.
And it's just not enough. And so it really warms my heart to see how like people recognize that today, that that's an issue. Like I talk to people retiring all the time about like the things that they've signed up for that exist now. So it's definitely getting there, and people like you are helping spread the word, because it is such, you're right, it's such a vulnerable stage for any veteran's life.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll say one more thing about focusing on younger veterans is that they are the future of the veteran community. We want to keep that legacy going, and we want to create it, like keep creating it as an empowering space for those future veterans that are to come, and more welcoming. I think we've all been kind of like walked into a VFW or an American Legion and kind of felt like, oh, this is kind of like an old boys club. I've heard several stories personally about not being welcomed, whether they were too young, whether they were a woman veteran, or they weren't a combat veteran, because that's becoming more and more common with these new generations. So I think it's important to make it more a friendly place, welcoming place for these younger veterans.
Do you think did you feel understood and welcomed when you were new in the Navy?
When I was new in the Navy, I felt like, there I at least had some, people in my class, like whether it was boot camp or my A school, I was with a group of people that were equal to me. So at least like I had someone to relate to.
But as far as like the senior leadership goes, do you felt, or yeah, did you feel like they understood y'all, or did you feel like there was a disconnect there?
I felt like, yeah, there was like some understanding. Like I've been in your shoes. You're the choices you're making, what you're doing. I've been there, so I know what it feels like. But yeah, sometimes there was some disconnect. Absolutely.
Would for all those people out there that are like, kind of putting up walls and comparing like combat veteran this and I did that and you didn't do this. What
Hmm.
are some steps that you've seen help to prevent that from happening, or at least help that situation in general?
I think just, you know, like talking about it, like just saying that that's going to become more and more common. We're going to have less people who've deployed, and that doesn't make a difference because you still signed your name on that line. You still signed your life away. You still committed to something higher than yourself and put your life on the line for your country. I mean, so many people who haven't deployed have died in training for our country. That shouldn't matter. And I think just
Yeah.
saying that and, realizing a veteran is a veteran, regardless of experience and service.
Yeah, definitely. And you had a great point in there too, where like they're the future, and do we want to set our future up for success, or do we want to set them up for failure? Because I feel like sometimes we
Yeah.
lose sight of that. Like when, because I'm a senior NCO, like I get in circles where sometimes senior NCOs are just completely bashing and criticizing the new airmen, right? Like I've heard those conversations before. Um, and yeah, we definitely need to get away from that, because no matter how we feel about it, they are going to be, you know, steering the ship. No pun intended. I know
Yeah.
you're, but they'll be steering the ship one day, and we just have to equip them as best we can. And the Navy or Army or Air Force that they're joining today is not the same one that existed 20 years ago. And so I think there's so much importance in just understanding that. um and I do that myself as best I can, try to connect with them, see what their interests are. I mean, it really just comes down to caring, right? Seeing them as a
Hmm.
person that needs help, and empowering them as best you can, and having them know that you've got their back. So at the end of the
Yeah.
day, if you supply that, everything else will fall in place.
Hmm. Yeah. I think that is kind of one of the definitions of good leadership, is right there, just trying to, find that common ground. So they will respect you.
Yep, absolutely. All right. So let's see. What's our second one here? Second topic: how the veteran community can be more inclusive. What's your thoughts on that?
Oh, so I think some of these topics are kind of overlapping even
Yeah.
because, yeah, like I was saying, just including, like future veterans, they are going to be more female. They're more diverse. We're seeing people from all different backgrounds, more and more percentage. It's less the white male that's the veteran. So just keeping that in the back of our minds, because veterans are going to have those key core problems coming back from war, coming back from training. But the kind of remedies, the solutions that we're seeking to help these problems, such as PTSD, such as MST, they're going to be a little different than more traditional methods of helping these problems. So just, keeping that in mind, and also welcoming these different types of veterans to our community and making sure they feel welcome and a part of it.
Yeah, you're right. When I first joined, I wish I paid more attention when I first joined. I think about it often. And what I didn't realize then that I realize now, because I've been in 18 years now, I wish I would have paid attention to the culture more when I first joined, because when you first join, it's probably the most unusual time you could join. It's the most unusual time of your career, because you're seeing the history, these senior leaders start to retire.
Mm-hmm.
These are people that have been in 20, 30 years. So you're kind of seeing like what the past looked like and what that culture
Yeah.
looked like. And I wish I just paid more attention to that back then, so I could, help me in today's time. But, when with the diversity stuff, when I look around my office and I see like men, women, all sorts of different cultures, even from foreign militaries that joined the US Air Force, like we just have the best of the best when, we have open arms to diversity. Like we have the
Mm-hmm.
best team possible, and it's such a huge advantage. And when we learn about, you know, other people's cultures and their why, like they have some pretty powerful stories. And, you know, it gives us a sense of connection and a sense of purpose, you know, when we embrace our diverse workforce, because it's unusual. There's no other place like it in America, really.
No, there's not. I mean, you'll be working with people from the East Coast, the West Coast. I mean, people who were born in other countries. It's just such a melting pot. It's really a good representation of what America is. It's our military members.
Absolutely. Okay, so we did have some overlap with that second topic. So we'll hit this third one here, which is why tapping into the veteran community is so important. So what did you mean by that?
So I would have to say when I first got out, I didn't even own that title of being a veteran. I kind of just, looked at my service like I only did 4 years. I don't have any service connected disabilities. I didn't think I even could go to the VA. I had one of my mom's friends who worked at the VA. She let me know, like, hey, you have 5 years where you can get service at the VA regardless of your disability rating. So it took me a while before I owned that title of veteran. And so I think, owning that title is your first step to, accepting your benefits, and then accepting that you have a whole community of people that know exactly what it's like to go through that identity crisis, go through that job change, that huge career change, maybe that moving across the country, that feeling of isolation it's just what you went through. So you're not alone. And so that's why it's so important to be involved in the veteran community when you get out, and so important to, doing outreach to those people that don't feel comfortable or don't feel like they're worthy of the title veteran because maybe they got out, for mental health reasons. Their contract was cut short because they certain circumstances, so they feel maybe unworthy of that title of veteran, but they still deserve it, and they're still a part of this community.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And yeah, everyone should be, what was what I paid attention to that's really stood out to me, and one of the reasons why I hoped I would never separate if I didn't have to, and I think it really speaks to the veteran community, but I noticed all the people who did get out, like maybe kicked out, maybe it was for medical reasons, maybe it was for like a DUI, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Those seem to be the individuals that latched on to like their service the most. And that always
Mm-hmm.
intrigued me, right? Because I'm like, they hated the military, they were in trouble, they constantly bashed it. So why all the pictures on their profile, of them in uniform? Like, why do they still show that? And that
Yeah.
always intrigued me. But I think it's because, whether they had a good or bad time, they definitely miss, the community. They definitely miss the camaraderie, the friendships, and being able to depend on people, especially when you need them the most. So that always just stuck out to me, and encouraged me to stay in. And to see someone like you who is kind of embracing them on the other side, I think is a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. A few people popped into mind when you said that, because we've all seen those type of people. Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe there's so many different stories going into that. But yeah, like you said, they're definitely still a part of this veteran community, and are deserving of those benefits if they were honorably or, other than honorable, had the discharge.
Right. And so for your podcast, Vet Chats, what is some of like, because I want to talk about that too, because I think it's just too cool that you started this thing. But what are some of the memorable guests that, really stand out? I know you talked to a lot of incredible people, but what are some of the guests that like really jumped to your mind where the story was like, holy cow?
Yeah, so I've had a few that just kind of popped up, and one of them, she's a civilian. Her name's Dr. Pam, and um, she is a veteran. She's a VA disability rating. She assesses PTSD, so she's done a lot of research in that. And speaking with her and how she talks about PTS, it was so interesting. And something that she said that stuck with me was that it takes an average of 10 years for someone with PTSD to even apply for disability, because it hasn't registered with them that that's what they're going through. So these people have suffered for 10 years, thinking that this was their normal life before even seeking help. So she really sticks out to me as a great episode. And kind of a fun one I did back in October around Halloween. He's called The Military Medium. And he, yeah.
What? I love that.
Yes. So he served, I think he did over 20 years. And he, in the Army, he got this calling that he could speak to the spirit world. And he does a lot of talking with widows, talking with military families that have lost someone in action, and kind of helping them get that closure that they needed.
Wow. So when you interviewed him, did he do anything for you personally, or did he just talk about like his life?
He did a lot of talking, but I really wanted to ask him a few questions. But no, he kind of like explained, and he went over a few scenarios that he's experienced, and some encounters that he's had.
Do you think he's the real deal?
So I love stuff like that. So I'm very inclined to believe that. But someone with a more skeptical eye, maybe yourself, might have another opinion.
No, I lived in a straight up haunted house in Maryland. So your boy likes ghosts. So
Yeah,
I'm a firm believer, and I've seen UFOs too, a few of them, and I was on a UFO podcast actually with my dad. So that was
cool.
It's called UAP Studies.
Okay.
And we had a great time, me and my dad. My dad's a retired Air Force officer, and he's seen a lot of crazy stuff in his time too. So we just got to like have this awesome talk. But hey, don't even get me started on. I should just start a paranormal podcast, because I could talk about that all day. So hey, we might do that one day. No, we might do it. We'll do an Instagram live thing. It'll be a whole thing. We'll do it on next Halloween.
I'm all for it.
Yeah, let's do it next Halloween.
Let's do it. I'm serious.
Yeah, we'll do like haunted bases or something. It'd be so awesome.
Yes, that would be a lot of fun. I do have a few ghost stories from our group that they're pretty creepy.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. Halloween. Don't forget.
I won't.
Okay. So we hit our topics. And so I have a few. I'm going to do a second Heroes Gauntlet. Sometimes I do two. So I'm going to hit you with a few more questions that I just wanted to ask. Okay. So you got to go through it again.
All right.
So what does Vet Chats look like in 20 years? What do you hope it looks like?
Wow, 20 years. That is really cool to think about. I think, I think the stories are going to get, as the millennials age, like any other generation, I think we're going to have more and more success stories, maybe even, higher up people. I don't know. I mean, I just hope I'm still doing it in 20 years.
So that's it. You just hope you're still doing it.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. When I started this, I said, I'm going to commit 5 years. And that first 2 years, I feel like that's the trying time. And there's so many times where I wanted to throw in the towel, but I said, I'm giving it the 5 years, and I'm at 2.5 now. So, yeah.
I'm at 2.5 also. So we've been doing this the same amount of time. That's crazy.
Yes.
That's awesome. And so let's talk about that. The trying times. What was the time that, you did contemplate quitting it, like quitting doing the podcast? Was it because it wasn't getting the traction you wanted? Was it from criticism? What made it tough?
Mostly my family in the most loving way possible. I have three three younger ones, and this kind of it puts a hindrance on the family time too. I have to, when you commit to something, you're taking away from something else sometimes. So I do a lot of stuff at night. But yeah, just family life balance. And then I also work full time for the Navy still. So it's like, how can I balance all of this? And this would be the first to go because, my job and my family is higher up there.
Yes. And I'm in the same boat as you. I have days where like, my wife's like, oh, this is so cool. You're killing it. I love this. And there's other times where she's like, really, another one? And I'm like, oh, snap.
Yes.
And yes, any podcast, if you have a family, they're helping as well behind the scenes to make it possible. So shout out to your husband for holding it down.
Yes. Yeah.
What's his name?
Be able to do this. His name's Nick. He's a Navy vet as well.
Nick, thank you so much. You're killing it, brother. Thanks for the support. I want to give him that shout out.
Yeah, he will appreciate that because there's been so many times where he's, the kid, there's a stairway right here and he's keeping the kids upstairs while I'm doing a live or something.
Those are the funniest moments to me. And I just keep them in my episode when my kids jump on my lap. Like they figured out how to unlock the door now. It's the whole thing.
Oh no.
So, okay, here's another question for you. If you could have any guest in the world on your podcast, who would you pick?
Oh, yeah, this is a tough one to pick from. Like there's like those people that come to mind that are like, really high up in the podcast world. But also who I find interesting. I don't know this one.
It doesn't have to be a podcaster. It could even be a celebrity. Like, is there anyone that you really look up to?
I really like Kesha.
Really?
Do you know who that is?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so she's very smart. She's very musically inclined. And I just like to know more of like her upbringing, how it was, because her mom was a singer-songwriter as well. And just get to know like what that was like to grow up like that in Tennessee.
Kesha. That's random.
She's my go-to when I can't think of stuff. So yeah.
I thought you were gonna say, yeah, no, you should say Britney Spears and be like, what is going on, girl? Like, what is happening? There's something going on with that. I don't know if you've seen that, but
yeah.
But Kesha, funny enough, I just watched a YouTube video. I watch random YouTube videos that are just pointless knowledge. And one of them was about it had to do with Kesha, but basically there was a girls emo pop group in like the mid 2000s called the Millionaires. And they had a lot of success for being amateurs on MySpace. But ultimately it failed because they were amateurs and they didn't know what they were doing. So ultimately it failed, but Kesha's team took what they did right and applied it to her and her marketing and her look and her lyrics.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really cool. See, I never knew that.
Yes.
Kesha's really into paranormal and stuff too. She just had a series on, I think it was Discovery Channel, where she did a lot of paranormal investigations.
Did she really?
Yeah.
I feel like you've been ghost hunting or something. I don't know. Have you ever done ghost hunting?
I have done ghost hunting. I went with the Wisconsin paranormal investigators back in high school, because that's where I'm from, with northern Wisconsin, and yeah, it was very creepy.
It is. When you go looking for it, you're gonna find it. I will say.
Yes, you will find it.
All right, so we'll do the last question because I know we're running out of time here, and I don't want to keep your husband waiting with the three. You have 3 kiddos?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
3 kiddos. How old are they?
So 7, almost 8, 4, and 1.5.
Wow. Yeah, you definitely have your hands full. No wonder you hopped off when I didn't get on in time. You're like, screw this.
No, I was just gonna text you. I wasn't gonna leave you.
Sorry about that, but you understand. I had to
Oh
get them
yeah,
squared away so I wasn't handing my wife a tornado. Um,
yeah, totally get it.
so because mental health and drinking are tied together, and because you've been through that, one of the hardest parts for me to not drink and continue not drinking was, it's easy to say you're going to stop drinking, but then when life stressors
Mhm.
start coming on, or you're in weird social situations, you start to realize, oh, this is why, right?
Yeah.
This is why
Hmm.
I drank. And so I was hoping you could kind of just give any advice to, how do you stay the course, stay the path? Like, even when the times were getting tough, like, how did you get through that?
Well, I'll be honest. That's not just in my past. I still struggle with that probably weekly. There's always that temptation. And I even have a log like where I try to like what I strive for. But yeah, I still struggle with it. Because it was such a almost like a cultural thing for me, like being in the military and also like growing up, my parents drank daily. That was just the norm. I'm not saying they would get drunk daily, but it was just a nice way to relax. So I just try to stay out of situations where I would tempt to overdrink. Not keep as much alcohol in the house. Volunteer to drive, or if I'm meeting friends, I'm driving, so I know I could only have like one. Um, you really have to plan ahead. You can't put yourself somewhere where you're going to overdrink or make a choice that you don't want to. And a lot of my my choice for not drinking a lot is for health reasons. I think that's my number one motivator, is how it affects my body. Even how you said, like my face, it was puffy, it was always red. So that's one of my huge motivators, is how it makes me feel, especially, the next morning.
Yeah, there's that quote that's like, drinking today is stealing happiness from tomorrow.
Hmm.
Isn't that like just hit the nail on the head? I mean, that always went through my head when I was hungover, that line. Every
Yeah.
time I was hungover, I would think of that quote.
Yeah. There's never a morning you wake up and you're like, I'm so glad I drank last night. Like,
Right.
never happened.
You got that right. Okay, Jenna, thank you so much for all the incredible stories that you shared, um, the path that you're on to help our veteran community. It's just absolutely incredible. But I did want to leave it open for you to give us any final thoughts or parting words before we head out here.
Well, thank you again for having me on. And I just want to say here that I hope to have you on Vet Chat as one of our guests.
Because I can't wait to come on. I'm thrilled about it. But Jenna, my
Yay.
parting words to you is that, when I see you on Instagram talking to veterans, sharing their stories, you give me a sense of hope when I see that, right? Like, you give me a sense of purpose and hope, and that everything's going to be all right on the other side of that service. And every time I see you talking to another veteran, I'm reminded of that. So I just want to tell you thank you. It is noticed, it's much appreciated, and I cannot wait to see where you take this awesome journey.
Well, thank you very much. That really means a lot.
All right, y'all, thank you so much. That was the hero's journey of Jenna Carlton.